She's a recovery influencer. I think we just kind of termed that recently. And she's the
Yeah.
host of the ODAAT Chat podcast, ODAAT meaning one day at a time, and the founder of the Sober Life School, which I'm going to let her talk to you about in a little bit. Mrs. Arlina Allen, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited that you're on. You're also a writer, a working professional, a wife, a mother, and a sober person with over 25 years of continuous recovery. I think it's 26, 27 now.
Yeah, I just celebrated 26. I got sober April 23rd of 94.
Oh,
So
that's so awesome. I love that. So now, for those that are struggling, I just want you to share a little bit of your story and how you got to where you are today.
I'll just start off by saying that I like to talk about family of origin stuff because that really sets the stage. Like when I interview people, I'm always like, tell me about your family. In my family, I have very nice parents. Daddy's from Kentucky, and so I'll be dropping a couple of y'alls here and there. I can't help it. But my mother's from Mexico City. And when I was growing up, I didn't even realize that we were like biracial, because usually nobody counts the Mexicans as yeah, we were biracial and I wasn't aware. Yeah, my parents are really nice people. My dad worked at like Lockheed and NASA and was a government guy, right? He was a former Marine, stand up, he was, from the Depression era. So he was very frugal, shall we say. And my mom, man, she came from a relatively big family, not super religious, but did have that sort of my mom. You know what I say about my mom? Like, she's my best friend these days, but when I was growing up, she was a very different woman. Like, I tell my kids, that sweet little lady who comes to visit you? Yeah, that's not the bitch that raised me.
Well, be careful, because they're going to be saying that about you in like 20 years.
They might, which would be valid. There are times when my dark side does come out, but I handle my dark side very differently than how my mother handled it. I typically, if I lose my mind, because I have a funky brain too, if I lose my mind, I typically have a process now of how to handle my feelings. Like, recovery for me is mostly about emotion management. We talk about coping skills and recovery. And for me, I just didn't get any coping skills when I was growing up. I was molested by a neighbor girl when I was really small. Yeah, that did some weird things to my brain about who I was. And I grew up in the church, so there is this idea of perfectionism, right? But I don't think that was the intended message of it was a Presbyterian church that I grew up in. And I think I just missed the message. I believe, and it's so interesting because now that I look back on it, the message of like Jesus was, I'm here to absolve you of your guilt. Since I've been in recovery, I can see that in all the major religions of the world, they all have, the human being across the board has this inherent guilt complex, right? So I missed the message of, there was this person that was here to forgive you of your guilt, so that we don't have to walk around feeling guilty all the time. And also as an image of somebody who is living ideals. But the funny thing about ideals, like the principles of the program, they're mental constructs, like the horizon, right? The horizon is a mental construct. It's not actually a place. Like, you could never you could walk towards the horizon, but you'll never get there, right? Despite what some people, right? Isn't that good?
That's really good. I love that. And I haven't heard it in that respect before. I love it.
Yeah. So the program of the 12 steps, the principles of recovery, even the principles that were taught by religions, those are ideals that we grow toward, right? It's progress, not perfection.
I believe the exact same thing. Like, when these religions came around thousands of years ago, they didn't have traffic and 401k plans and stuff to worry about. Like, they were like, am I going to eat today? I'm going to sit under this tree for a while and think about that. And that's what happened. So now there's all these rules, these principles to live by, and all we can ever do is do the best that we can to apply them to the world that we live in today. They're impossible to live up to. There are a bunch of ideals that are impossible. So what happens is, when you can't live up to them, then you feel like a failure. And then addiction comes in, whether it's, drinking or using drugs or eating too much or watching porn or working too much, whatever it is. you don't live up to those impossible to live up to ideals or to-do lists, and you feel like a failure. So what I want you to talk about, because you're so bubbly and happy and excited, how do you stay that way in the midst of struggles or in the midst of like what we're all going through right now in the current world?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so in all fairness, like happy and bubbly is sort of my natural disposition, but I'm not like this without work. Like I joke around that I'm high maintenance, right? Like, and I have a very intense morning routine that I love, by the way, because I get up and I wake up and I go, oh, I'm going to go do my morning routine. And that's when I tap into all the feelings that I want to feel. I'm very focused on what I want to feel, right? But first, I have to contend and manage the things that I don't want to feel, right? It's like I can't get to Candyland without crossing some ladders. I don't know if you ever played Candyland before.
That's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah. So I absolutely have to address my anger, my fears, my sadness, my anxiety. I have to address all those things and resolve them before I can get to my happy. And that's what I do in my morning routine. I do a prayer and a meditation, and my prayers are mostly like, I heard a prayer from Oprah that was like, use my personality, all that I am, all that I hope to be, and use it for your purposes. And I believe that when we are in a state of joy, that's when we are the most effective. I feel like the universe supports that. Like the universe always says yes, right? So I am very careful about what I think and what I feel. And I'm not trying to resist my negative feelings. They're there for a reason. And so I've learned that feelings like anger and those are teachers. And so I lean in and I'm like, so I don't know if you're familiar with Tara Brach. She's a meditation teacher. She wrote a couple of books. One is Radical Acceptance and the other is Radical Compassion. And she teaches this meditation process to resolve negative feelings called RAIN. And RAIN stands for recognize, like you recognize, oh, I'm feeling something in my body, like something's gnawing at me. And up until, my instinct is when I feel something I don't like, my temptation, lead us not into temptation, my temptation is to disassociate from that feeling. That's what my drugs and alcohol usage was all about, was disassociate, right? Do not feel this. So this process of RAIN brings me back to the present moment. It brings me back to what I'm actually feeling, what is happening in my body, like recognize, oh, sadness. Is that what it is? Is it sadness? Is it anger? What is it? Where is it? Where is it in my body? And then breathing through that and then allowing. So we allow the feeling to have some space and then investigate. It's like, what is going on here? Where is this coming from? Like you investigate and as nurture, and I keep a picture of my little 5-year-old, 4-year-old girl self on my desk because I think about her when I meditate. Like, what does she need? Does she need comfort, validation? Does she need rest? Does she need a snack? I mean,
right. No, that's so good. And you have to take care of yourself. There's a new, have you heard of the Miracle Morning thing?
Oh, love Hal Elrod. Yeah. Love
it's
him.
real popular. Yeah. And, we don't have to get into all of it. The biggest thing that excites me more than anything is the visioning how things are going to go and go that way. So you could do that either way, right? You can wake up in the morning.
We do that.
Yes, we do.
We do it anyway.
Yeah. So if you can steer it in the right direction, whatever the right direction is for you, then that's the way your day's going to go, so
Absolutely.
have that day. When I wake up and I meditate and I write down some positive things and I think that way and feel that way, and then I vision how the day is going to go, and then I go have that day. That's how the day goes, or closer to that. There's always disappointments, hurdles, obstacles, whatever like that. But as long as you're making an effort to go in that direction, you're going to get closer to that direction. If you wake up and look at Facebook and see what politicians are doing or whoever isn't behaving the way you think they're supposed to, and then you start living in fear and anger and frustration, that's the way your day's going to go. It's your choice.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. It's the power of choice. I do a writing exercise every morning that's like a live your best life. Like what was your perfect day? Write it out as if it's already happened. And so for me, it typically starts out, I am so happy and grateful now that. And then I go into, whatever goal that it is that I'm working on. And the visualizing it, like across my room on the wall is my manifestation statement the power of vision boards. Like you could create a vision board on Pinterest or cut pictures out. I used to do vision boards all the time. And I started like being very careful about what I put on that, because that stuff comes to true. That stuff, it's like, be careful what you wish for. You might get it. It's like, well, that's why. And your subconscious brain is always working on your behalf, right? So a lot of the tools I use, and I teach a class called Reinvent. It's at selfesteemcourse.com, and it's typically geared for right now. It's geared towards women, but it's about using your subconscious mind to help you manifest the lifestyle that whatever goal, if it's relationship, because it's my deepest belief that we only allow into our lives what we feel we deserve, right? And so we need to deal with all our limiting beliefs and reframe it in a way that supports us, because we're already using the laws of the universe, like cause and effect. It's like you think a thought. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi had this saying, and it's been adapted in different ways. But the basic idea is that whatever you think, then you feel, and then you say, creates the life that you're like. We are literally living in the residual of all of yesterday's decisions. You and I made a decision to get on this podcast several days ago. Now here we are. We're living in the residual of a decision we made prior to this moment. And so I'm all about like, let's break it down. Like, what is it that you do want? Like, what negative feelings do we need to resolve? Like, let's not pretend they don't exist.
Yes, and I love that. And these are some of the things that I teach as well. But it's like, not drinking isn't the problem. Using drugs isn't the problem. It's what we're doing to cope with the real problem. And it's going, you have to go deep to figure that out. So once again, we're talking with Arlina Allen. And so, Arlina, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do something like that?
So I have a podcast, the ODAATchat.com. They can reach me through there, or I'm on Facebook. You can look for the ODAAT Chat podcast on Facebook and reach me through there.
Awesome. So tell us about some of your struggles and what got you to where you are and how you're able to be the person that you are today.
When I was about 24, my life was not working. My life was not going well. Definitely had an addiction to drugs and alcohol. I was a big weed smoker. What I didn't realize then was that I was self-medicating. And I've often thought, especially in my teenage years, like to some extent, I felt like drugs and alcohol saved my life, because if I had to feel all the feelings, I don't know that I would have survived it. Like I was on the edge anyway, because I had this idea when I was growing up that, growing up in the church, it's like I was always asking God to fix me or make me different. And I never was. And so at some point I gave up. I decided if I couldn't be good, I was going to be good at being bad. And so that's what I did. And I just went against all my values that I grew up with. I mean, to kind of encapsulate my drinking and using experience, I always say, like, if it was in a bottle, a bag, or blue jeans, I was doing it. Because, I mean, anything to change the way that I felt, right? And I sought validation from men. It's like I was seeking external validation because I couldn't give it to myself, right? And so recovery for me has largely been about learning how to cultivate internal validation, right? And really get in touch with who I really am. And what happened for me was that I was in an outside sales position then, and two of my customers were in recovery, and they started sharing things with me that were just firing off all the light bulbs. Like I was having all these epiphanies, and listen, it wasn't like I hadn't been searching for the answer. I kind of lived in the self-help section of Barnes and Noble, but it was more like 7 spiritual laws to money. I was all about the money and the men. I figured if I had those two things, then my life would be perfect. And the funny thing is that I wasn't that far off. It was love that saved me, but it didn't show up the way I thought it was going to, right? And it didn't really show up until I showed up.
I mean, so many people are searching for the exact same thing on the outside to fill the inside void. And we always say there's, all the cliches that we hear in our recovery world all the time, but do your insides match your outsides? You can have all the nice stuff and all. You can always be looking for those things to make you feel validated, secure, fearless, whatever your thing is. Mm-hmm. But until your insides feel the same way, you're just not going to have that in your life?
Well, what happened for me is that so I met these two guys, and they quickly turned me over to the women. They were like, in this 12-step program that I won't name officially, they were like, the men work with the men, and that's my thinly veiled attempt at honoring some of the traditions, which have gone out the window for the most part. But
We have a common purpose. Our purpose right now is to help people that are suffering. So
the thing is I didn't drink and use drugs privately. You know what I mean? Like,
that's
what the
interesting.
example of my horrible self is okay, but my recovered example self is not okay. Like, that doesn't, that does not make sense to me. So I have to go with what makes sense.
That's right.
So, but in any case, these two guys were like, yeah, you need to work with the women and do this thing. And I was like, oh crap. Because I didn't feel like I had anything to offer another woman. I was terrified of women. I didn't trust women. I didn't have a great relationship with my mom. And, but I was so, yeah.
I'm terrified of women too.
Yeah, you should be.
I'm just kidding.
we can do some coaching and reframe some of that for you later if you like.
Yeah, we'll get back to that. That's a whole other show.
Dude, yeah, relationships. I'll just tell you this one thing. So I've been married. I've been with my husband since I was 5 months sober.
Nice.
And over the years, he was the one who taught me how to communicate. And so now we have a conversation and I'm upset about something, I tell him ahead of time what I need from him so he doesn't have to guess.
Ooh.
I tell him what I want. And sometimes I forget to tell him. I'll be like, oh, Baba. And he'll just look at me like, and I go, poor baby. And he goes, oh, poor baby. And he gives me a hug because that's what I want. You don't need to fix me.
I need instructions too, like that.
Yeah. I'm telling you, if you get the download from your partner and you're like, what do I do? Just ask. How can I best support you right now? My heart goes out to you. How do I help you right now? Do you need a list? Do you want to vent? Do you want solution? Do you need a hug? How can I help you? Not solution. Well, typically the the validation has to come first. Yeah. You have to validate that you recognize somebody's feelings are valid. I could see how you would feel that way. That's all we need to hear, right? A couple of follow-up questions like, is this how you're feeling? Is that how you're feeling? Oh my gosh, I would totally feel that way too. I totally get it, right? For the most part, that's what we need to hear first before we go into solution. And so that's how my husband and I communicate now. After all this time is like, if I'm upset, I'll tell him what I need ahead. I just want to vent. Can you just listen to me for 5 minutes? And be like, sure.
I heard this great podcast. It was about, I think it was last year or sometime, but this woman, she's a big speaker and I forgot her name, but she said what her and her husband do every morning or throughout the day, whenever, is that they check in with each other and then they go on like a percentage basis. All right. So 100%. So if one says, oh, I'm at 100% today, I got you. And the other one's like, oh, that's good. I'm only at 20%. And if you're like, so I can't handle it right now. So if you talk and if you're both like, I'm at 20%. Well, me too. I'm only at 20 or 30%. You're like, well, we're not going to have any big decision-making things going on right now because we're not going to get there. Right. So let's check back when we're both like 80 to 100%. And then we're both capable of processing things well.
Yeah. And it's so important to have like a support system that, if he's not available, I have a support system that I can go to vent.
Yes. Very important. And that's what's great about the world that we live in recovery is like we speak the same language and we have people to talk to.
Absolutely. There's just
isolation. Isolation was a huge part of my problem. It was like my intuitive reaction to things is when something gets hard, difficult, not easy to solve, and I don't know what to do, my intuition tells me to go sit in a room by myself somewhere and try to figure it out. But I don't know how to do that.
What's funny?
Yeah.
Figure it out is not one of our slogans.
Right. Yeah, it's not a good path to take. I mean, I need to run my stuff by somebody, and not because they're better or whatever, or like more important than me. It's just because they're here. And if I say, this is what I'm thinking, or this is what's going on, they can look at it from an unemotional point of view and say, that's not really what's going on. And
I was just going to say, I was just going to say that very same thing. When we're emotional about something, our perspective is skewed and we're not actually able to see the situation clearly. That's why we reach out to an outside party, because they're not emotionally invested like we are and they can see things clearly. It's like when someone comes to me with something, it's so easy for me to just be like, oh, this is the problem. It has nothing to do with this or that, because I'm not emotional about it. That's the beauty about this way of life, is that we do this together, because that's a self-esteem building exercise. When somebody comes to me, it makes me feel good that they, number one, trust me, but then I get to speak solution. And whenever I'm in the solution and I'm into something positive, that's something that builds my self-esteem. So service is a huge part of my life and something that I do constantly because it makes me feel better about myself.
I'm selfish. You said that, selfish, self-centeredness. Like I'm thinking, I love, what's that one? I may not be much, but I'm all I think about.
All I think about. Yeah. I often say, like, when I showed up to the rooms of recovery, I was completely self-centered, but incapable of self-examination. I needed a process to help me do the self-examination so that I could, a lot of people really are offended by the term character defects. And I'm not offended by it, because I kind of want to know what's broken so I can fix it. That's sort of how I address that word. I don't really have a problem with it, but I want to know what's wrong. I want to know.
Now you're in a place where you have some humility, and I think that's why people are, for most people that are successful in sobriety, they're like usually beaten down. That gift of desperation, where I'm willing to see things differently now because I just can't do it by myself anymore. Yeah. And it sucks that we have to be so hurt before we're willing to look at character defects. Like before, when you come into sobriety, recovery, AA, whatever AA you're going to, you're hurting. Otherwise you wouldn't go. Like, let's just keep it real, right? So you're not in a good place, you're hurting, and people start throwing these big words around like resentment and character defects and shortcomings and fear and all these things. And you're like, I just need to stop drinking. I don't know what you're talking about there, but I'm not ready for that, all those big things yet. And what happens after a little time is you become willing to start looking at those things, because those things are the reasons you did those harmful things to yourself for years, for decades. It's cool to get to that point, and I love everything that you're sharing. So when people come to you, what are some of the tools? I mean, we've been talking about them. What are some of the tools that you give them to help them empower themselves to be successful, sober, recovered people?
There's so many different there's like Smart Recovery, there's 12 Steps, there's Refuge Recovery, there's so many different programs and things out there. But the point is to do the work, right? We need to do the self-examination. I think the one thing that keeps people from acknowledging their character defects and stuff is that they feel so guilty and they have so much shame. And so we put up all these barriers, and we put up all this resistance to doing the self-examination. And I think it's like, when you just hit rock bottom, it's like you're broken, but you're kind of broken open. It's like that Pema Chandra saying that sometimes things fall apart. When you think things are falling apart, they're actually falling together. And that was definitely my experience. But some of the tools, morning, I'm such an advocate of the morning ritual, right? So prayer, meditation, I read a daily reader. I have something called the 5-minute journal that I love, because it's like 3 things that you're grateful for, 3 things that would make today great, right? It's like, what would make, like, let's define it. Peter Drucker was like a business person, but he was like, anything that can be measured can be managed, right? So let's get clear about what would make our day great. And then what is your positive affirmation for the day? I pull these really pretty, cards by Gabby Bernstein. It's like a daily positive message that's really pretty. And, I have a women's group that I take pictures of everything, and I post it in my women's group with like a little daily message of my own. And so it's like I'm in service, I'm practicing gratitude. I do the meditation part. I largely do like visualization exercise to visualize what it is that I do want. I'll do a small writing exercise where I talk about my perfect day, like as if it's already happened. That's the thing. It's so interesting that at our very tiniest makeup, it boils down to positive and negative energy, right? It's like even our atoms and molecules are held together by patterns of positive and negative energy. So we are literally attracting to us at the level of thought and feeling. And so that's why, I don't know if you've ever heard whatever you think about, you bring about. It's like we are literally like magnets drawing to us or repelling from us at the level of thought. So for me, it's so important to spend time cultivating what it is that I do want to feel. And the funny thing is most people have the same thoughts. 95% of the thoughts that you have today are the same thoughts you had yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. So it's like, and most of it is fantasy anyway, right? Most of the time we're either in the future and the past. Neither one is actually happening right now. So it's fantasy. So why not use your mental capacity to cultivate something that you do want? Right? It's like you learn to use the laws of the universe in a way that supports you. So that's what I do. I use all the tools in the morning, which sets my day. And if something happened, like today, when we began a conversation, I was like so upset about something that happened. And so we talked about it and I was like, oh, I feel so much better. Thanks for listening.
I did have one last question. When people hear your name, Arlina Allen, in 20 or 50 years from now, what do you want to be remembered by?
A happy, bubbly person that helped them out of their suffering. That's all. Made them feel better about who they are.
Yeah, and I think that's all our purpose here. Wayne Dyer was like that. Whenever he encountered people that were struggling with what's my purpose? Why are we here? And we could talk about that for 5 episodes. But what is my purpose? And they get stuck on that. But our purpose is to be of service in any way possible to any other human being on the planet. And that's, if we all took on that mindset, then things would go a lot smoother, I think.
Yeah. And I just want to tell you that you are all those things. You're a bright, bubbly person and you're helping people out of their suffering. So thank you so much for the work that you do and all your efforts to get the message of recovery out into the world. I have such a soft spot in my heart for people who are willing to do that because I know how hard it is. It's a lot of work.
But thanks for sharing your experience, strength, and hope, Arlina. And thanks for everybody who is watching. And if you want to reach out to Arlina, she has her podcast, the ODAAT Chat podcast.
ODAAT.
Thanks, Arlina. And thanks everybody for watching the Funky Brain podcast. Have a great day today and we'll see you tomorrow. Hey, Dennis here. Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, I need to quit? Or maybe you've tried dozens or even hundreds of times on your own, but you can't do it. If you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, call me now for a free 20-minute consultation. We'll just talk for a little bit and we'll see if you don't feel better. And while we're all dealing with the COVID pandemic, I'm offering 2 free full 40-minute coaching sessions. We'll get you set up with the tools you need to become successful in recovery and sobriety. I know from experience, having been sober since April 8th of 2003, that it is not easy, but you don't have to do it by yourself. I'm here to help. We'll do it together. If I can get clean and sober, anybody can. So call me right now, not tomorrow when you're sick and hungover. Again, right now. I'm here to help. Have a great day.